and try to track down Arthur Staple from The Athletic in New York.
Hello.
Is Arthur Staple there, please?
Speaking.
It's Mike Richards from Raw Mike Richards. You're joining us live here this morning. Thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it, Arthur.
Glad to be here.
Looking at sort of how things have fallen out, you were the one who broke the Lou Lamoriello story. And, you know, when you look at how this played out, as a journalist, for what you do for a living, is this something that sort of instinctually you thought maybe was going to happen, so you sort of went down that road? Or was there something that was sort of placed in your lap and you just kind of followed it that way? How do you come to get this story?
You know, in this case, I think there was a lot of stuff that was already being hinted at by plenty of people who cover the league, you know, respected guys like Darren Dreger and Bob McKenzie and Elliot Friedman. And I think it went from kind of this makes sense logically when Lou Lamoriello is moved out of the GM's role in Toronto and his son is already here, and the Islanders owners have already made it quite clear that they're thinking about making some changes, and who else is really out there that's got the kind of experience to take over a hockey operations department. So, you know, I think you go from there and start asking around, and you know, little tidbits come up, whether it's, you know, fans asking on Twitter is kind of you got to be reminded sometimes to keep checking back with your sources on that when things seem a little bit stagnant or nothing has really been advanced. And you know, a couple days ago, I just checked with some of the people that I trust, and suddenly it turned into, from, you know, they're talking and maybe something will happen, to, not only has something definitely happened or about to happen, you know, Lou Lamoriello's already sat down with John Tavares. So I think that was the thing that kind of pushed it over the top, and here we are. You know, you don't really want to be in a situation where you're guessing, and it seemed like it was pretty solid all the way around, and lots of other people were right around it as well. So you know, it's nice to be first, but it's more important to be right.
Well, Arthur, you know, you mentioned that sit down with John Tavares. Now, of course, here in Toronto, there's still a faction of fans that are rubbing the beads and on their knees praying that maybe that John ends up in Toronto. But the reality is, with Lou going there, it probably obviously changes the percentages on the chances of him staying. What would you put it at? Is it right now a 50-50 proposition?
I think so. I think that's pretty accurate, and I frankly, that's way better than I would have put it at, you know, last week, before anybody really knew about this meeting, before really anybody knew. It was definite that Lou Lamoriello was coming to take over. You know, I think I was probably around 50-50. The last time I was there was probably right around the time that the organization announced that they were getting a new arena in a few years at Belmont Park Racetrack back in December. You know, really, there were lots of positive things that were being said that day. John Tavares was there for the announcement as captain of the team, and he was saying a lot of the right things, and then the team just kind of fell off the roof after that for the rest of the season. And you know, the numbers, I think the percentage chances kind of went down incrementally day by day, and then you get to the end of the season without playoffs again, and you know, just the uncertainty and not having signed and not having even really been discussed about being moved out to get some assets back, it looked pretty bleak. So I think, you know, John Tavares has been pretty steadfast all along in saying, or his camp has said, like, he's looking for reasons to stay. He still likes Long Island. He likes the people that work here. He likes his teammates. He likes his life here. But there was not a lot that was certainly appealing to him to stay. You know, the arena was a good piece, but obviously he wants to win. And when you bring in a guy like Lou Lamoriello, he's not a terribly patient guy. You know, he's going to make his decisions, whether it's personnel, whether it's coaching, trades. He's going to be aggressive, and I think that's something that's going to be appealing to John Tavares, because he obviously wants to win now as well.
Arthur, great to talk to you. It's David Bastel here. When you talk about Lou's personality, and he is a Hall of Famer, he is going to do good things for any organization he works for. As far as that Islanders front office is concerned, how does it work exactly with Garth Snow in place? He's been there for a while, and you know Lou kind of wants to handle everything. He is the head of hockey ops, and I could almost see him slash general manager slash president slash governor. It's one of those things that he has done in the past. Does this happen to be the last hours of Garth Snow on Long Island, or what happens on that front?
I think it's still up in the air right now. You just kind of have to go by what we know of in the past. Obviously when you're a guy in Garth Snow's position, president and GM for the last 12 years, you're used to having the final word on things, and now you don't. Even if he's going to keep the GM title, even if Lou Lamoriello wants him to be around and be part of the front office, it's a difficult transition to make, to not having anybody have final say over you, to not being the one that puts your stamp on things. So that's obviously a big consideration. They do have a good relationship, those two. They're both from the same region of the country here in New England. I'm sure that when Lou Lamoriello was coaching at Providence College, when Garth Snow was in high school, also just outside of Rhode Island, they probably were aware of one another. And Garth, without really the success part on the ice, has tried to run his organization the way that Lou Lamoriello ran his Devils organization, a very kind of small, tight-knit group. Obviously, the budgets in both places were never huge, but Garth is very limited in what he discusses. Certainly, then Lou kind of invented the NHL cone of silence out of the front office. So I think there's definitely some mutual respect there. So I think we just have to wait and see. It's really it's obviously the biggest question still right now in terms of personnel. The team's in the middle of their meetings in advance of the draft next month. They're making their game plan for the off season, and obviously it's a huge one for this team, not just with John Tavares, but they got to get back and being a playoff team again. And with some great young talent they have, they've got to get it figured out. So Garth Snow is still leading those meetings. Lou Lamoriello is probably diving in, maybe even today, to join up and observe and probably put in his 2 cents. And we'll see how that dynamic works as we get along here in the next few days.
Yeah, it should be really interesting. They got a fantastic base of young talent. You mentioned it there. They're going to have to shore up some position-wise, goaltending perhaps, defense perhaps, but an interesting figure, and we heard a lot about it here in Toronto, and I think it's just because of the relationship they've had in the past with Lou Lamoriello and Ilya Kovalchuk. We keep on hearing that Lou will be talking to this free agent. We keep on hearing that he wants to return. He's wanted to return to the NHL for the last couple of years. It just hasn't happened. Is this a fit for the New York Islanders because of who they have there now and Ilya Kovalchuk? Because this is going to be a prized free agent that clearly still has gas left in the tank.
Yeah, I mean, he's a talented guy. There's obviously some risks with his age and having been out of the NHL for a couple of years, but certainly there's that relationship between him and Lamoriello that goes back to their Devils days. And whether there's a fit, it certainly would be interesting. I think everybody sort of assumed he was ticketed for the Rangers, but they're in the middle of as close to a rebuild as you could imagine for that organization. So I don't know if he's necessarily a fit there. It's certainly whatever price he's going to command, whether it's 3 years or so. But I think for the Islanders, you don't ever want to say, especially a team that if they can get Tavares signed is going to be up against the cap all of a sudden with all the other players they have to get signed. You don't want to say that a team has to make a move like that to put the stamp of credibility on the organization. But I think it would certainly raise some eyebrows around the league if Lou Lamoriello comes in and then within a matter of weeks can get one of the bigger name free agents out there to come to Long Island as well. Obviously Kovalchuk doesn't play the same position as Tavares. He doesn't play the same position as Matthew Barzal. He would certainly be a nice fit with both of them. But on the other hand, scoring goals wasn't their problem last year. It was mostly keeping the puck out of the net. And as you pointed out, they need a goalie. They need another top four defenseman. They probably need to shore up their middle six up front. So, it's an interesting dilemma that they'd have if Ilya Kovalchuk came to Lou Lamoriello and Lou Lamoriello went to his owners and said, this guy wants to come here and we want him here. It's, you want to, like I said, you want to make, announce your presence with authority, I guess, going into Lou Lamoriello's first offseason now, having taken the job. But you also have to be smart. It's a salary cap world, and there have been times in the last decade of Lou Lamoriello's general manager career where he's kind of thrown caution to the wind, and those signings, whether it's like a Ryan Clough in New Jersey or Matt Martin in Toronto, that just haven't made sense in the modern NHL.
Well, Arthur, apparently all you really need to do to be successful in the National Hockey League is have Marc-Andre Fleury as your goalie. Apparently, this is the key to success. I mean, and it just sort of bring it up to obviously to what we're looking at now and what Vegas has done. The Marc-Andre Fleury's story has been, to me, Arthur, just incredible. The way he's played, what he's been through, the highs and the lows. I mean, I don't know who you're going to cast in the movie, but whenever the movie comes out, Arthur, I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know what? Islanders saw Vegas early in the year when Fleury was out with a concussion. Malcolm Subban was out. You know, they had an 18-year-old kid that they had called up from the Western League who was sitting on their bench as a backup when they came to Brooklyn back in November. So, you knew what kind of team they were and what kind of coach they had in Gerard Gallant. The way that they played, they certainly were competitive, but they just seemed like they were never going to be able to overcome that sort of thing. And to think, they cycled through, 5 goalies in an expansion year, and you'd think normally, well, that would be because none of them were any good. It was more just decimated and getting down the depth chart, and they still managed to not only survive but thrive. It was once you saw them staying at the top of the standings in the Pacific Division, I think anybody around the league that was a doubter about them, and certainly I was one of the many, you have those doubts removed because of the way that they skated and they played, and you sort of had an inkling once they got to playoffs. It wasn't just a bunch of cast-off guys who had never really played any meaningful games. There were not only Fleury, but guys like James Neal, Eric Holla, who's been a good playoff performer for Minnesota. They've got guys up and down their roster who can rise to the occasion, and I think just the way that they cycle through all 4 lines, the speed that they all play with, all 5 guys on the ice, it's been fun to watch. I think when everybody wants to talk about what it all means to the NHL. I mean, they're a great team, and they're certainly entertaining. And if anyone can get a chance to see a game in their building, it's a heck of an experience. So I can't imagine this is anything but a positive for the league, even though there's fans of plenty of other teams, including the one that I cover, that are pretty sour. They've been without a trip to the finals for such a long time, and this team is 1-for-1 and on the verge of winning a cup in its first year.
Yeah, it's something else. Arthur, just circling back to our Islander conversation, we're just getting some questions on Twitterverse for you, and it's an interesting one. So the relationship Lou Lamoriello had here with Mark Hunter was a very good one. Lamoriello was a big fan of Mark Hunter. We know that Lamoriello is also of the age where, you think he'd have to retire within the next 5 or 6 years, and Mark Hunter isn't quite there yet. Do you see a situation where Mark Hunter might join Lou with the New York Islanders as well? That's coming from Peter on Twitter right now, watching us live on YouTube.com.
I certainly think it's possible. I don't know that there's the urgency now just because of the rules that Mark Hunter is operating under, where he can't join another team until after the draft and free agency, just because of his institutional knowledge with the Leafs. So, I would imagine that if Lou Lamoriello had a desire to bring Mark Hunter in, it would be to put his stamp on this coming draft. Not being able to do that, I would maybe his interest would be cooled a little bit, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't know that there's a ton of urgency to it right now. Lou Lamoriello said on the conference call yesterday he's going to have to rely, obviously, on the scouts that are in place right now with the Islanders. I don't know at age almost 76 whether he's bird dogging around the amateur level the way maybe he used to. So yeah, I think when people talk about he's fully in charge and he has final say, yeah, it's going to be him announcing one of those picks or both of those at 11 and 12 on the draft floor in Dallas next month if they decide to make them. But this is still an organization that has produced a couple decent draft picks in the last few years. Certainly getting Matthew Barzal 16th overall a few years ago, and Anthony Beauvillier 28 in that same draft. So, I don't think this organization is completely bereft of good institutional knowledge. So, I think in the short term, Lou's going to have to rely on who's here, and maybe after the draft, we'll start to see some other things shake out staff-wise.
Arthur, thanks so much for joining us here this morning. It was just an outstanding job. It was great having you on the show. Hopefully, when hockey picks up on the other side, we'll get a chance to talk to you again. But I really appreciate you joining us here today.
Thanks a lot, guys. Anytime.
That is Arthur Staple here this morning, joining us from The Athletic in New York.
What? We just become best friends? Yep.